Oh, hello, everybody. This is Michael Workman here. This is Resin Market Brief with the Resin Smart team. We're going to talk about an interesting topic this week on resin purchasing and kind of how that is evolved over the years. And I'm very thankful to have two guests with me, Tyler Wheeler, who has recently joined our team. Tyler, I'll let you introduce yourself in a second here, but we do have a special guest today. And that is you, Justin Riney of YouTube, LinkedIn fame with your podcast, Redefining Plastics. Thanks for joining, man. Really appreciate, you accepting the invite.
Yeah, well, to be clear, I reached out to you first.
Well, you did. And I was going to tell that quick story. And in fact, I haven't even told this to you, but I've been listening to your show for months now. And I had, gotten onto it from a mutual colleague of ours, Mitch Best. And, wow, I should have shut my teams off there.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever. And he said, you need to check out this show, Michael. I know you'd love it. And so I did. And, what I really love about what you do on the show is you talk about plastics in a positive way, which I think we see eye to eye on. And you talk about, some of the myths that are out there that get proliferated on various platforms, be it LinkedIn. I mean, there's a lot of nonsense out there about plastics, and you're trying to address that with real conversation with real experts in our industry. So that's what got me onto you, man. And I was super humbled when you reached out to me and offered me a shot.
I love what you're doing, man. Like, honestly, like we talked a little bit about it on my show, but I think being a buyer is tough. I know we're going to get into this, but like being a buyer and knowing what information actually matters, because there is a plethora of sources of information out there, and then figuring out what actually is a driver and then how to use that driver to your benefit, it's a big deal. And that's why, like, when I was watching your stuff, I was like, man, I should have done this when I was a buyer, and I just never did. And so that's why I reached out to you. I was like, we're kindred spirits here. I think this is going to work out.
I think so, man, and it certainly has so far from this end. So we're very honored to have you today and be a part of this conversation. Tyler, I don't want to shortchange you, man. This is the first time we've done one of these together. You've recently joined us. You've got a long career in buying. Wanted to give you an opportunity to, introduce yourself to the folks out there. And I'll ask you the fun question: why did you decide to join our team? But I'll let you get to your background first, and
just
then
throw it out. Just throw it out there.
Yeah,
Just put me on
straight
the
to
spot to tell everybody my career ambitions. That's perfect. Yeah.
Please, I'll get to know
So
you
for the better
faster that
part,
way. Right?
Yeah.
well, for the better part of a decade, I've been procuring resin, and I have had a ton of fun doing it. I think that in my time at some of the world's largest consumers of plastics that I've worked for in the packaging and in the medical space, I was able to drive just a ton of value for both my employers, but also for the resin industry itself. Like, I think we did a lot of great work with getting into more sustainable materials, with growing with domestic partners. Just, we solved a lot of problems on both sides of the table. And I thought, what better way to take that experience and do some good in the world than to offer that to a wider base? So I wanted to take my skills on the road. I wanted to become a consultant, and I wanted to teach others a little bit about how to create win-wins in plastic. I feel like I had a tremendous education at my first job. There were two tremendous female leaders that said, hey, he's a little rough around the edges. At the time, I couldn't even spell polypropylene. And they said, we can teach you this. So they gave me a chance. I feel like I really learned from the best. And those folks are still in the plastics industry today as part of the network that I rely on to deliver value. You said something about being a buyer is difficult. And it reminded me, if you don't mind, I'm going to use this golf analogy. There's a book by Tom Coyne called Paper Tiger. And one of the concepts he rolls through in that is something called the pyramid of talent. And the very bottom rung of this pyramid of talent of golfers is the best golfer you know. So you know somebody who's really good, local kid, maybe a scratch golfer, right? That's the bottom. And then there's, teaching pros. And then there's club pros. And then there's the mini tour guys. And then there's the tour guy. And then there's the Tiger Woods, right? So it's like that pyramid is so tall that I think until I read it in his book, it was pretty enlightening of like how tall that talent can go. I think resin buying is actually pretty similar. When I was at my former employers and I was driving all this value, I thought, and resin buying is easy. Well, it was easy because I was negotiating pennies when I should have been negotiating dimes. Like there are levels to this resin buying, and with the access to data and insights and expertise that RTI can provide, that's how you go from being the best resin buyer to really being a professional and working your way up the ranks. So a couple thoughts on that.
You still haven't mentioned the reason why you're at RTI, and it's to work with Michael, right? That was your main goal in life.
I put the T-ball on the tee like I do with my 3-year-old.
Didn't hit it.
And you swung over
missed,
it.
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you swung over it, but you did hit a couple of really key points there. Although the golf analogy, I can't relate to. I mean, 18 handicap, and I haven't played in once this year. But I think what you're getting at, Tyler, is, I mean, I use the Tom Brady. I'm a Michigan guy, right? And the reason he's arguably, if not the greatest of all time at a quarterback, is because he's surrounded himself with folks that help him elevate his game. He focused on nutrition, arm angle, getting the ball out as quickly as he can under 2 seconds. Like, he focused on becoming an expert in the things that kind of fuel what the quarterback position is in football. And it has it's a pyramid too, right? It has levels and layers, and you have to focus on all of those things in order to get up that pyramid. So that's my way of taking what you said and making it not golf, which is more of a comfort zone for me.
On the Michigan topic, so I'm a Vikings fan. Just look at JJ McCarthy and how terrible he's looked for his couple weeks.
Yeah.
You can make it look really easy, or you can make it look really hard. And right now, he's making it look really hard. Like, the hardest job on earth.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, he's got a few weeks to heal his ankle and get his mind right. So, but hey, listen, when we're happy to have you, Tyler, by the way. Tyler's going to be leading our engineered materials practice here and really focused on polycarbonates, ABSs, those types of materials. I did want to turn that question around to you, Justin, and ask you why you originally got into plastics as a buyer, and, why'd you do that? And kind of what was your experience when you started?
It sounds like Tyler and I have mirror image. Outside of the two women, mine were two men that were responsible for getting me up and running. So I was working for Sunoco Products, and the leader at the time of the resin buying group in supply management came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to buy plastics?" And I was like, "I don't know anything about plastics. I'll give it a shot." Didn't know polypropylene, polyethylene, polystyrene, any of it. Had no clue. But then right next door to my office there in Little Hartsville, South Carolina, there's a guy named Jeff Mitchell, who now still works for the same company, but it's part of Topan Group now because all their plastics was pushed off. The guy is an encyclopedia of information and possibly the most patient person in the world. I just sat there and I asked him questions. I darkened his door 5 times a day, every single day. And he never acted like I was bothering him. He just kept smiling and answering questions. And if it wasn't for him, I would have been a complete and utter failure. I think the reason why I got into plastics was happenstance. The reason why I'm still in plastics, because I like the people. That's the main reason why I'm still here.
Yeah, the people are a huge part of it, and it's all about the networks that you build. Definitely encourage everybody. Not final, but another plug to Redefining Plastics. It's a great way to keep up with the plastics industry, especially sustainability and recycling. Just an incredible focus there, Justin.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. You guys both keyed in on something. Tyler, it was you with the two women, Justin you with the two men, helping shape your development as a plastics buyer. I came from the sales side, right? I had 2 mentors as well. Both were men, and they really kind of helped shape me on what it meant to be a sales guy, a resin sales guy in the industry. But outside of that, right, outside of the people that you had to lean on, how did you learn the industry? How did you pick up? I mean, thankfully, you don't have to spell polypropylene. Our industry loves acronyms, right? So
yeah.
PP. Thankfully, some of the things make it easy with acronyms. But how did you guys learn? How did you pick up things as a buyer when you got started?
I guess I'll jump in there first, but I found the smartest guy or girl in every room that I was in, and I just constantly ask questions. I think that's the easiest and best way to learn. So for me, there were a couple scientists at Sunoco specifically, because that was my first plastics role, that I spent every hour that I could talking to and asking questions. Why this polymer for this package? Could we use a different polymer? Like, what's the deal with thermoforming? What's injection molding? What about vacuum molding? They just all answered every single question that I had. And I think as a buyer, there's a certain skill set that you can learn and you can kind of translate to anything, but you can't really be successful in those roles unless you have a general understanding. I think the same goes for sales. Like when you were on my show, we talked about having that knowledge base to be able to sell something. I think the same goes the opposite direction. If you don't know somebody's feeding you a line, then you're not going to be successful. If you don't know what the market's doing and why that would impact what it is that you're purchasing, you're just going to lose every single time. And so for me, it was just find smarter people than me, which in that company was very easy. It's like everywhere I turned, somebody smarter than me was standing there, and I would just ask them a ton of questions. And then I read vociferously, like always, every day. I found a different website that had information, and I would just go through it. I think that's the only way that I was successful. Surround myself with good people and constantly learn, constantly ask questions, and show that I cared.
Yeah, I think the last part there for me was my secret power was bring the passion, find the way to get interested in what you're doing, right? And asking questions I get frustrated at times when my 3-year-old is constantly asking questions, but there's something inherently human about that, right? This seeking to understand by asking questions and getting better. And I mean, that's the way you do it. Tyler, what about you, man? Anything, I'm sure there's a lot of similarities to what Justin was saying, but anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, I took a similar approach to Justin. I never minded being kind of the dumbest guy in the room. I really didn't have my ego didn't get in the way of acknowledging the experience that the people in this industry come with, and I was happy to just ask questions and play dumb. And I leaned a lot on my suppliers actually. I think that's what a lot of resin buyers do when they first get started is their seller will say you buy on an index. Okay, what's an index? And your seller can give you like 80% of the information that you ever require as a buyer. It's just that last 20% is all around actual costs and actual price, and that's what they're going to keep as opaque as possible. I got 80% of it from people who have been in the industry as salespeople that were my salespeople for a long, long time. And then when there were technical questions about our own product, I would ask our internal engineers and make sure that I had a great relationship with them and did everything I could to try to deliver 51% of the value in all my interactions. So if I was talking to engineering and I really needed to be the consumer of their information, I tried to make sure I delivered something back to engineering, whether that was a site visit and lunch or that was solving a pain point at one of the lines that they had with the materials they were using, and that I was able to impact that from procurement. Then I would take the opportunity to do that. I wanted people to feel like, okay, this guy is actually listening and he's actually here to support and he's on our team. So I think the complexity in resin is always such that you can usually find a way that every one of your stakeholders can get a win.
I kind of want to run down the path of, I know this is your show and I'm stepping in, but
No, I want to see if you're going to run down the same path I was going to go.
the conversation you had about relying on suppliers, I completely agree. I did the same thing in some cases, but that's kind of antithetical to what modern procurement tells you to do. Like
Absolutely, it is.
If you're in a big supply management organization, they will tell you never trust what your supply partners tell you. And I pretty much disregarded that advice from every boss I ever had. It's like, these guys are here to lie to you. They're not here to give you the right information. They're only interested in themselves. And then I figured, well, if they're interested in themselves, that means they want to sell me more. And the only way they're going to sell me more is by building a relationship and proving their value, to use your phrasing earlier. So why wouldn't I want to build that and use that source of information? Because that's a huge source of information. And honestly, that's the main reason why I was able to be top performer every year that I was in that role from a savings perspective every single year because of the relationships we had. And plastics is a relationships business more than just about anything else.
Sense. So, um, yeah, well, you lose, an artist puts it out there and yeah, as soon as she put it out to play, whatever is movie, television, painting, but what is it that I can say that
People that get the best deal in plastics are the ones that have the best relationships and are able to work.
Scout is here.
So I think modern procurement misses the relationship aspect of business. And that's why I'm not in it anymore. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tyler. I know you wanted to add something.
Please, Tyler.
I was just excited to wholeheartedly agree with you. That is exactly what I ran into. I mean, I was a top performer every year I was in Resins. I exceeded my target every year, and I did it almost exclusively on relationships. And sometimes that was catching somebody who had failed us, that was taking advantage because their 300,000 pounds of polycarbonate falls below what I needed to address at the time. It was like kind of unaddressable. And then when you go in and uncover your price has only gone up really consistently for 2 years, and all I had to do was make a call, and then the price comes back down. That's not a relationship. That's taking advantage of me when my back is turned. So those pounds ended up going where? To somebody who I knew wouldn't take advantage of me when my back was turned, and under a global agreement with rebates and other advantages, right? So, it's one of those things where I'm sure that the company that was selling to us at the time was thrilled with their constant margin expansion and non-value add distributor model. And I'm sure they were loving the margins that they were making. And then one day when it finally caught my radar, it was gone. So I just couldn't agree more with you. And I will say that got tough to explain to my bosses when they'd say, okay, walk me through your strategy. And did you do the same strategy as all of our finished goods? Did you write the same contract with all of our finished goods? And I think an interesting point here, and I'm curious if you guys would disagree, but when it comes to manufacturers that make plastic components and are actually purchasing resin always gets treated differently. It's 60% or more or less the cost of the goods that you're selling. So even if you have a mature procurement organization, as resin goes, the business goes. So there's always more emphasis on it. There was always different rules around contract terms, around liability, right? They just don't fit that corporate procurement overall strategy mold. So I felt like I had the freedom to execute deals in relationships because resins was different. Any way to get it done. And the plastics industry has a very specific way that they like to move pounds. And if you don't play within that, you're going to spin your wheels trying to do things that just aren't going to happen that way, because the plastics industry is almost in every case larger, bigger, and less flexible than whatever business the molder's in.
So I agree with everything you just said. So the last procurement role I ever had, and if people want to do a little internet sleuthing, they can figure out exactly what I'm talking about right now. Worst leader I've ever worked for. Not my direct boss, but above that. Person came in, said, we're going to completely change the way we do procurement. We're going to save money. This was a huge buyer of plastics. First meeting I had was, we need contracts on everything that we buy. It's like, first off, that's a stupid idea. I'm not going to do that because that's not the way to make this work. Supply agreements are perfectly fine. And everybody, I can look them in the eye and they're going to agree to abide by the terms of that agreement. I'm not going to put a contract in place because they don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's not in our best interest, because if I need to move because of whatever reason, I need flexibility to do that. And there was a back and forth. It was we got to do it this way. We got to fit within the model because everybody else is doing it this way. You can't be different. It's like, well, this is a different industry. There's no reason to do it that other way. And if we would have done that, we would have lost so much and we would not have had the savings that we did that year. And it's just this idea that you can put some sort of a formula in place to guarantee success in a procurement role. It just takes the human interaction out of all of it. And there was a part of me that was it's like downtrodden after a while. But then if you have a good leader in procurement, they understand, hey, it's a relationships business. Do what you need to do to get the job done. And I've had that experience too. And those were great jobs. because it was like, hey, if you can get the job done, you get savings and you're not putting us at risk and you're not causing any kind of major issues, go do. And that's just that's going away in large corporations today, in my opinion.
And I wonder sometimes if salespeople, and Michael, I'm curious what you'd say about this, but I wonder sometimes if you get a buyer, a resin buyer, and they come in and they're like, you have to sign this contract, and you read it, and like the resin seller is responsible for like all liability, right? And then they're like, we're doing an RFQ, and they make you bid against your own pounds, right? Like if you have a buyer that comes in like that, I felt like a lot of times the sellers were like, okay, this person doesn't know the plastics industry at all. I have to educate them, and I'm definitely not giving them a low price point to start at. Right? This is somebody who's just combing the market, and I feel like all the salespeople can pick up on that almost immediately, and then all the salespeople respond with like a 10% tax or something on that approach.
Idiot tax.
A little bit, yeah.
We called that the PIA tax, where I grew up in plastics, pain in the ass, right?
I got you.
So, yeah, listen, Tyler, I mean, you're spot on with that. And Justin, I think I've definitely observed buyers coming into roles where you could very clearly tell they're from automotive or aerospace, where it's just a different world and different focus on different parts of the metrics, if you will. But 100% agree with the commentary, guys, on relationships. When I was at Poly One, customer-centric sales training, that was our acronym, CCS, for our teaching engineers how to sell, which is how I grew up in plastics. And the first stop on the train track, because you could only go one way, was relationship. And that was where you needed to focus on authentically and genuinely connecting with your buyers, and then trying to build common ground to where the goals were mutual, right? So you're right in the sense that I think a lot of bigger organizations are trying to take that element out of it. And listen, RTI, Resin Smart, I mean, we are a procurement optimization organization. We do not tell people to do away with your relationships, because that is a huge part of the reality of this market. You have to have the right relationships and be always developing them, talking to many, buying from a fewer subset of those folks you talk to. Gone are the days where you only get your pricing information from your vendor. You can still get that. You still have to talk about price. And now it's trust but verify with that additional 20%, Tyler, that you were talking about that you do on your own. You just want to check to make sure that, you're not getting hosed. We all know that has happened over the years in certain situations.
Yeah, I think so now that I'm on the other side of the coin, other side of the table in sales, I talk to people that I used to buy from, because now I'm working for a company that I used to sell for. I mean, I used to buy from.
Right.
And the conversation always comes back to the people with the better deals are the ones that are easy to work with, the ones that have built strong relationships. RFPs are a real pain for everybody. It's just so much easier to get into a room and have a conversation. This is what I need. Can you do that? This is what we need. Can you do that? Like, well, maybe. Let's find a middle ground. Let's negotiate. Let's talk, rather than here's a spreadsheet to fill out with 75 questions that nobody's going to look at again. Because like 95% of the things in that RFP just get put into a spreadsheet and then are housed somewhere that people hang on to for reporting later that nobody really pays any attention to. How do we get back to like really driving to the best cost? The only way to do that is get in a room and talk. Tell people what you need, what you're seeing, where's the market, how can we be better partners? Because really, that's what your vendors are, your suppliers, whatever you want to call them. They're your partners. And you have to find mutually beneficial solutions. And the only way you do that is by talking. And I just think it's dead now. Because if you look at procurement organizations, they move people around all the time. They don't want people getting too comfortable with their supply base. So then they move you to a different role, because then you have to build new relationships. And then they feel like they're going to get better numbers. And it never works out that way. So I don't know who's in charge of putting these supply management educational programs together, but they all need to be fired and they have to start over again, because everything that they're teaching is wrong, in my opinion. But I have a pretty strong opinion.
I think that's one of the things I like the most about you, Justin, is your opinions. I was talking to Tyler the other day, and I know he's having some Wi-Fi challenge right now. But one of the things that we were talking about, you just made me think of, Justin, which is around mutual goals, right? I still remember an interaction I had with an injection molder out in the West Coast early on in my career at Poly One, and I never had a buyer ask me how I was going to hit my sales goal before. And he asked me that in the first meeting that I ever had. And it took me off guard. But first of all, it was a great way to like change the power dynamic in the room. I was probably already tilting his way, but it was now tilting even further because I was fumbling to try to figure out like how I would answer that
How
question.
do you answer that? That's a tough question.
But he was coming at it as we started talking more. He was one of our largest suppliers, and he was asking through the lens of how could he be a part of that. And then in exchange for that, how would I help him help his company hit his goals and his procurement cost savings? And that is such a, back to Tyler's pyramid, that is up the pyramid in terms of way to interact, because now you've got that seller thinking about you through a different lens, right? How can I and this person help me be successful, rather than the across the room, you have to be my enemy because we're two different sides of the vendor relationship.
Now, I don't know if you want to go down this path, but I'm going to suggest it. So when I was a buyer, I did stakeholder mapping on every single major negotiation that I had. So I would put in, if we're going to have a negotiation, there's going to be 6 people in the room. Here are the 6 people. Here's what they do. Here's what motivates them. Because I had the conversation with every single one of my supply partners, so my main contacts, and said, all right, who's going to be in the room? What are their key things? What do they really want in order to get this done? And then we figured out how we were going to communicate to each of those people. And that's the only way you can do this, is you have to understand what their motivations are, and then you have to express your motivations in return. It has to be a two-way street. It's like, hey, right now, everybody wants payment terms because of where
Right.
the economy is. So that would be a key factor in every single one of my negotiations, because I know at some point somebody's going to say, we need lower payment terms because we're hedging working capital or whatever.
Yep.
So you just have to understand what drives those people in order to get to the best outcome. And I don't think 90% of people that are buyers ever really go through that or have that conversation of what matters to that salesperson. And the guy you're talking about here, Michael, was way ahead of the curve, was thinking about that long before that became even something popular. And I just think that kind of stuff needs to happen more.
I think one key piece of success, if you're going to negotiate in this relationship environment that we're talking about, which, by the way, like the textbooks, the negotiation training, everything you read about, it does not align well with this strategy that we're talking about in plastic. So like, there's probably somebody watching this that's rolling their eyes, being like, these guys are soft.
Yeah, getting the yes. They just read getting the yes, and they're like, no, this is terrible. Don't listen to these guys.
I think there's an example that I would share that gives you the right place to launch your negotiations. So in one of my roles, as I was going through our tail spend, I realized that there was a resin we were buying, and in one plant it was $2.50, and in another plant it was $1.30. Why is this same resin 2 different prices in 2 different places? Is it end use application? Is it some certifications that come along with it? Is it a different mode that it's delivered in? Boxes? Is that like, I kind of went through this whole analysis. I couldn't find really a good reason why it was so different. So I came to the negotiating table. I brought this up, and we had a significant price decrease on that $2.50 resin, right? I was only able to do that because I had my own internal benchmark to go off of, right? But I think that it's fine to be the first negotiator to put a value out there. I think a lot of times the old school, they say,
Anchoring.
You're right. But if you know what you're looking for and you have strong reasons to believe that that is the right price, then when you go ask for it, that shows the seller this person's informed, they know about where they should be, and the number they threw out is both realistic and low margin, right? It's okay to be that first mover in that way, but to do that, you have to have some other benchmark data. And that was
really
one of the main problems that I had as a resin buyer. And one of the hardest questions to answer was, I had a CFO who was really hard on this, and he would say, how do we know that it's a competitive price that we're paying? I was only in the chair for 2 years. It's about the only price I'd ever seen. I don't know. How would I gain access to my competitors' books, or how would I cross-reference this to somebody else other than through the RFQ process? Now, let's say you're a large medical manufacturer and you're buying just a regular wide spec, not wide spec, but just like a
not
common
medical.
commodity.
Gonna
Not
say,
wide spec.
yeah,
My
I want to
mistake.
find
But
that medical client.
well,
There may be an
listen,
application there somewhere.
there's an application there somewhere, but if you're just buying a commodity polypropylene and you carry that medical name, you're probably paying a premium versus the automotive guys or the packaging guys, just because that's the name that you carry. So how do you validate that? And that's where I think an RTI would have been so helpful to me in my buying journey, to be able to look at my spend holistically. And when you're buying 400, 600 line items of resin, to be able to actually benchmark some of those, especially in the engineered resin space, where it feels like the price is whatever the sales guy woke up that morning and felt it should be. Like, so I think that one of the keys here is, can you benchmark so that you're well informed of what the price should be, and then utilize your relationships to drive to that price? Otherwise, you might just have a really great relationship with a seller and still not coming anywhere near maximizing your resin buy, which is ultimately your responsibility in the role, right?
Yeah. So I crapped on RFPs earlier, so I'm going to backtrack that statement just a little bit. For benchmarking purposes, using an RFP at the front end of a negotiation is not a bad idea, specifically if you're pulling in suppliers you've never used before. The difficulty then is, in the resin space, every supplier knows if that is not a qualified supplier, if that material has not been run through that plant, that's not a serious offer. Because the process for a lot of these places, it's like a 6-month effort. So even if you're going to move, you got 6 months of work, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it, and then you're kind of breaking even in the end, unless you really want to make a point to whoever that supplier is, like, hey, nothing is safe here, kind of a thing. But using it as a benchmarking tool, I think is great. But then to your point, Tyler, is relationships take over from there. It cannot be just, here's the spreadsheet. We got a better number than you. Give us another spreadsheet. You got a third option now. Give us another number, without any kind of feedback. Because then it's like you feel like you're negotiating against yourself. So why are they even gonna, unless there's a conversation and there's a relationship? That's the only way that would work.
And I think that if companies I think one of the places companies could get so much better at is being excellent at qualifying alternate materials. One of the key things that enabled my success in my roles was, early on, I was able to switch materials in just like one line item, but it was a big line item. You move 10 million pounds, people notice. And once that happened I was able to, with credibility, because I think honesty is a key part of this, maybe not full radical honesty, but not lying, frankly, is just going to be key to building trust and long-term, as respect of your reputation in this industry, which, as we mentioned, isn't as super densely or it's quite densely populated.
It's a small industry.
So your word gets around, so you don't want to just be out there bluffing all the time, like at a poker table. So I think that when I was able to move one of those line items, I was able to go back to my supplier and say, there's a new sheriff in town. We are moving things. This is next up. What kind of partnership do we want to have for the next 2 years? And I often use the tactic of, hey, we RFQ'd this and we found a much lower price. Just lower this so much, so you don't have to match that price necessarily. Just lower our incentive to make the change. Make it so that it's not worth our while, right? And with that level of transparency and using the stick, if they don't decide to lower their price and actually moving volumes, that's the key lever, right? The biggest leverage in a negotiation is the ability to walk away. So being able to do that in some space to show your supply base that you're competitive, I think is crucial.
So there are two things there I want to run down. First off, honesty. You have to be honest. The first time you bluff and somebody calls you on it, and then you have to come back and say, well, actually, your original price was good. Let's just stick with that. You've lost every future negotiation. You will never get that back. You are done. So don't do that. Don't ever do that. Never say I've got a number if you don't have a number. It's a terrible idea. I see people do it all the time. It doesn't always hurt them, but eventually it will.
It'll catch up.
So just don't do that. And then I think the other thing that you kind of ran down is the like getting qualifications done. I think a lot of people in procurement don't understand how important internal selling is in that role, because you have to go to a plant manager. You have to convince that plant manager that is bonused based on the fact that they've got X percent of throughput or uptime on these assets. And you're asking them to bring that down to put a new material on that doesn't impact them unless you do make that change and you do save them significant money. So you have to be really good at telling the story for what you're trying to do and how it's going to impact them. And if you can't get those internal stakeholders involved, specifically in a big organization, you're dead. You're not going anywhere. You're not getting anything done. And then you don't have that leverage. So you have to be really good at internal selling. And that's kind of why there's a big part of me that thinks really good procurement people will make really good sellers most of the time. And I don't think enough procurement people get the opportunity to go into sales because they get typecast. And they're like, oh, that's a really good, it's a really good purchasing guy or girl. I got lucky that I got out. I know a lot of people that are really good procurement people that would be great salespeople, but they're never allowed out. And I think that it's one of my pet passion projects right now, or get some of the people that I work with in the past that want to get into sales. I want them over here because I think they will do a better job than a lot of people that are currently in the role, because they get it. They understand what the buyer wants. They've lived it. And I just think there's a huge piece of that we're missing.
And I would say my friends and family still think I'm in sales. I mean, like, I've tried to tell them, like, no, I'm on the other side of the table. I buy the stuff, not sell the stuff. But just my personality and kind of the way that people interact with me, they always think like, oh, he's got to be in sales, right? So I would argue that it works. It can work both ways, right? Like, I think salespeople make great procurement professionals for exactly what you just said. You have to settle 10 internal stakeholders, and sometimes, and I think we're going to do a webinar on this. It's like how to sell your salesperson, like turn it around and be an advocate and solve problems for others, be customer centric sales, basically, from the procurement chair. And at the end of the day in procurement, we're measured on how much we save. So if you continue just to deliver on that and do it in a way that makes people feel seen and heard and valued and respected, especially with that example of the plant manager that you brought up, that's how you can create sustainable value in the role.
I want to really kind of bird dog again this idea of buyers. And by the way, Tyler, you are in consulting now. So consultants always have to be selling.
You're kind of in sales, yeah.
You're kind of in sales anyway. But this whole idea of the buyer being similar to the sales individual and having to build relationships and finding aligned incentives. The one story that I think about through that lens is, again, when I was at my old employer, the buyer that was there was trying to bring some substantial cost savings on polyethylene, but the plant and the financial guys didn't care anything about the overall number. It was working capital was metric 1, 2, and 3. And so there was never going to be a position taken on that basis alone to bring in multiple rail cars of inventory. The buyer could have stopped there and could have said, well, I presented the opportunity to the business and they didn't accept that. Well, this buyer happened to, be higher up that pyramid over time, and it was able to find the way to tell the story in a way that would also resonate with the individual stakeholders' goals, the plant manager. Mm-hmm. They found a creative way to bring the inventory in, negotiate a rail car deal, but bring it in boxes. Yes, there was an upcharge, but it made sense given the trade-off in metrics. So
you store it, you put it on consignment, whatever.
Yeah. But that wouldn't happen if there wasn't the initiative, the relationships that have been built to allow you to be able to sell, right? Sell that concept that is the best thing for the company and for your buyer role. You got to get everybody's buy-in, and that requires getting creative with how you align incentives.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I think that's exactly right.
I got you speechless, which can...
That's one of the first times in the history of me where I didn't really have anything to add, because I really don't. I think that's exactly right.
It was my goal. I'm going to cross that off my list to leave you speechless on this conversation.
You're one of like 5 people. The other 2 live in this household and they're both under the age of 7, because they ask me questions all the time where I'm like, that's just the way it is. I don't know. I've got no other answer for you.
That's fair. That's fair. And I definitely understand the dynamic of little ones saying the damnedest things in our households. I wanted to ask you guys, we've talked a lot about your journeys in buying. The world has obviously changed in the many years you guys have been doing this. We talk a lot with folks that have been buying since the 90s, when the internet didn't even exist and there wasn't cell phones,
fax POs,
the bank of phones that are hard coded. Like, I can't even think of the name of the damn things. The phone booths, right? The bank of phone booths. I've heard those stories a million times. The world has changed. There's a lot more access to information. I would argue that is, I think one of you said it earlier, maybe even harder to sift through what's actually real and what's not. As you think about some of these challenges that buyers deal with today, with the world changing, what stands out to you guys as, a top challenge, and what would you be advising folks to do about it?
I would say regulatory is one of the biggest concerns, and regulatory combined with sustainability. So EPR is a good example. So packaging companies specifically are looking at how do we comply with California SB 54, for an example. Nobody knows. Nobody understands because the regulations aren't even done yet, and they're supposed to go into effect in like 2 years. It's huge. People are supposed to be making these decisions, and it could be huge capital expenses to make these things work. So keeping track of what's going on from a legislative perspective is more important now than it was when I first started. No question. And nobody's having these conversations in procurement, really, or having them well. Because I'll talk to massive brands and they'll tell me, this is what I'm doing. I'm moving from material A to material B to be compliant with California SB 54. And then I will tell them all of the reasons why that is not right and that is not going to work. And you're actually just costing more money and it's going to leave you with the same outcome. And it's because there's not enough people paying attention to what's going on there. You've got silos too. You've got your advocacy, legal people, government affairs are running down one path, and procurement's running down another path because this is what they think is the sustainable solution because somebody told them it was, without actually doing the due diligence to understand what is needed to comply with that law. I think that's huge. Second, misinformation is everywhere. People are putting stuff up on the internet all the time. Nobody's paying any attention to it. There are a lot of experts on LinkedIn that'll put stuff about what's going on in resin markets. 95% of the time I read that stuff, I'm like, no, you're not even close. You're not even in the same hemisphere as what reality is. So knowing who to listen to right now is very hard. I'd say those are the two biggest changes and the things that people are probably struggling the most with right now.
Before I
would add on to
tee it up to you, Tyler, just on the EPR sustainability front, couldn't agree more with that. We have too many conversations with our Resin Smart clients around what should we be doing here, and we have some very basic advice on what not to do more often than what to do.
But don't make $100 million investment in something until you understand how that's actually going to impact the bottom line. And are you going to be okay in the end, even if you do it?
Absolutely. Back to your point, like, we do the research, dig into this, and let's understand it. And again, another plug for what you do with Redefining Plastics. You have a lot of folks on there that are experts truly in sustainability and the recycling world and can help folks understand these things. So stay tuned with Justin on that front. But Tyler, I wanted to allow you the opportunity to answer the same.
Yeah, I agree with the regulatory and sustainability piece. I think it was an interesting challenge at some of the large brands when they're trying to move to minority-owned companies or finding other ESG opportunities when they would look to resin, because oftentimes at manufacturers, that's one of, if not your largest cost. And they say, what can we do here? It's like
nothing.
Exxon's not minority owned, you know, like I don't know.
I had that same conversation 1,000 times. There's nobody here. I can't, I'd love to, I just can't.
Same. Right. So and then when I was on a cross industry, like medical group, writing a white paper about bioplastics, and like when we jumped on the call, I was like, all right, playing dumb. What's a bioplastic? Crickets. It's like, well,
And you're writing a white paper in that group?
Right. Yeah. Well, but it's like, okay, well, we know that like, you can get some plant derived like monomers to make like a PLA. It's like, okay, great. That's like 3D printer on a little pen device or something. Like where are we going to find significant volumes of PLA that like are
doesn't
impacting the
destroy
plastics
your
industry?
extruders.
I mean, so it was like, it's like, are we doing all this just to focus on one of the smallest used plastics in the entire medical industry? It's like, or does the fact that, Braskem makes an ethanol or a methanol from corn that goes into
sugarcane
like
base.
monoethylene, sugarcane base, monoethylene glycol that goes into PET at a certain percentage, right? Is that considered a bioplastic now?
Biocontent.
Biocontent, right? So, well, I just think that in this space, there is a lot of, and I think this is somewhat intentional on the plastics industry part. Like there's a lot of ambiguity there. So if you run a pyrolysis plant, it's, chemical recycling, not bioplastics, but not bioplastics if that came from like a used vegetable oil, source, right? So I think just looking at all of the different options out there that are sustainable, whether it's post-consumer, post-industrial, different feedstock bases that are more renewable, which is just huge right now and only expanding. I think some of those nuances are a real challenge for people to navigate because you hear, I think our end customers hear like, oh, there's biodegradable plastic now. Can we get into that? Is it the same price? Like no and no. Like it won't kill your application.
Not biodegradable, first off.
And it's not compostable in any like sense that you could throw it in with, your banana peels in the backyard and it's just going to degrade, right? Like, so I think setting those expectations and then navigating that space along with regulatory to stay up to date, and why Resin's always keeps getting this like exception management in procurement. Those are the big changes that I've seen.
Yeah. So not only do you have to be an expert in negotiating, relationship building, you have to be an expert in what's sustainable, what's not, what's BS, what's real. How does that impact our business? What are we going to do 10 years from now? Because nobody else in the organization is doing that, at least not in a way that's easily consumed by the rest of the organization, like your lay people within there. So you have to become the expert in that area. That's the only reason why I'm in and doing what I'm doing now. Because when I was a buyer, people kept asking me, well, what's the sustainable option for this? And then I had to go find if it exists. What does it mean? How would that impact our business? So I'm all self-taught and then found other really smart people. But yeah, I think it's tough. It's really tough because you have to be, specifically if you buy a lot of resins, you have to be an expert on feedstocks for every one of the resins. And then what bio replacements are for each of those, or what PCR replacements, like what's the PCR market for polypropylene versus polyethylene versus PET versus ABS, like completely different, every single one of those. And they trade a different way. So it's like you're managing a whole different bailiwick at that point. It's complicated.
Different arbitrage opportunities, different capacity. You're right.
People glaze over as soon as you say arbitrage. Like, what the hell is that? Then you have to try to explain to them what arbitrage is.
Just love the way the word sounds.
I do too.
It's
and the amount of money I've made companies playing that. Like,
yeah.
Hey, I'm going to buy it here, ship it here, and then I'm going to buy this one, ship it over there, and we're going to save 3 cents on the spread. Oh, it's great. I absolutely loved it.
This is the way, as they say these days. I know this has been an awesome conversation. I wanted to sneak one more question in for you guys before we wrap it up. Given your buying journey, how many times would you guys say that you had a resin sales guy come in after you had gotten a price increase from me, you wanted to push back, but how many times have you heard, well, given your volume, there's not much I can do for you? I know you work for some pretty big companies, Justin, so maybe you didn't hear that at all, but.
No, I did. I did quite a bit, actually, because the nice thing about where I started, we were big buyers of certain things, very small buyers of other things. So the tail, as we talked about a couple times here, I would get a whole lot of, well, you don't have the scale. I'm like, well, that doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't.
Right.
Your scale doesn't matter at all. Now, and honestly, if your scale gets so big, it actually works against you because then you have to buy from everybody and everybody knows that. So if there's a diligent sales group out there and a pretty competitive market, nobody's going to be the initial mover there because they're going to be like, well, nobody else is going to give this to them.
Right.
So the small buyer has a little more flexibility. You can be more agile. You can kind of go after other producers. You can even look through distribution because at times you can get, let's just look at an industrial application. If one of the majors, we'll just say polyethylene, for example, if one of the major polyethylene producers came to me and said, well, your scale's not there, we can't give you any price reduction. I'm like, all right, I'll just buy wide spec through distribution because I don't need FDA approval. And I'm going to make sure it's not your material. That
Right.
conversation is going to change very quickly. And it's just knowing what levers to pull and knowing how to have conversations. And the other thing, and I'm going to throw this out there, the amount of people in organizations that come to me and say, CMA or ISIS says polyethylene 73 cents a pound right now, just as a dumb example. We're paying 85 for ours. Why is that? Well, first off, that's a marker. That's not the actual market.
It's not the
Let's
price.
be very clear.
Yeah.
That's two different things. And then second off, you're looking at the linear low versus the high density or whatever, vice versa.
Yeah.
Third, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We're buying in boxes. That's a large buyer. And honestly, everybody lies to these index groups anyway, because they don't want to give away the savings that they just got. So they have no idea where the actual market is. That's why it's a marker and not a market indicator. It's just up and down. Delta month to month is the only reason why those things are there. And I think that a lot of people look at those numbers and start saying, well, this is the target. We need to be better than that. But if you're a small buyer, there are so many ways to get your prices down. And honestly, it's probably better to buy through distribution in some cases, because then you have somebody advocating for you because you're not a small fish anymore. You're now a big target for that distribution. I don't typically advocate going through distribution unless you have to. But if you're a small to medium sized buyer, sometimes going to a distributor and telling that distributor, I'm buying from X today, because that's key. They have to know who you're buying from because they cannot go and negotiate on behalf of you for that material, because they're going to be like, no, I'm just selling them directly. Why would I go through distribution? So you have to target a different product and have to be willing to move. So there are a lot of different ways to go about it. Scale doesn't really matter as much as people make it out.
I'm so glad I'm recording this because I loved your response to that better than even I would have said. It doesn't matter, right? But some people hear that and that's okay. Well, I guess that's what it is. And it just doesn't have to be the result, right, Tyler?
Yeah. Like for an example, if you're a buyer, go to your sales team and talk to your sales team and say, I want a breakdown of the margin by volume for every single one of our customers. That is not a straight curve. That is going to be all over the place. You're going to have really high volume people that are going to have higher margin. Then you're going to have some that have no margin. Then you're going to have small buyers with no margin because it's relationship and it's been there forever. This is not rocket science either. I think that's the other thing that we need to be clear on. You just got to push to get to the best number, and you have to know what levers to pull is the only way you're going to get there. And the only way you can do that is having the right market intelligence before you go and do it.
Have the right market intelligence and the people to help. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler, please.
I didn't have to deal with that objection as much, partially because of how much we were buying. But in our spend tail, when we had that, it was usually like, we don't have a very big relationship. It was almost always through a distributor. And I find that almost everybody has multiple distributors, especially if they've been growing through consolidation. They have way too many distributors. So if somebody responds like, your volume's not really big enough here, it's like, well, then I'll just consolidate distributors and I'll just, I'll get this, even if it's share shift, I'll get it to somebody else to just consolidate who I'm buying from. If it really doesn't mean anything to you, then, and you're not, you have no value add. And if you're giving me that
we don't need you as a partner.
Yeah. And if you're giving me that response, we probably don't have a great relationship, because the response, should be from one of your key salespeople. It should be like, understand that you're having a pain point here. We can look at it, but what else can I look at? Where can we grow? How can we be creative and solve this problem? Right. So
let's work together.
I try to always put a positive spin on it, put a partnership and a growth aspect. And I kind of feel like when you do a supplier segmentation, pretty clearly who you want to grow with and who you want to get away from. So if those negotiations turn a little contentious, then executing your plan and consolidating or moving those volumes is also goes back to what we talked about earlier, like making sure that your suppliers know that they don't have all the leverage and that business can move, even if it's just a changing distribution partner.
Yeah. I think it also depends on whether or not you're under a traditional supply agreement, contract, whatever, or if you're month to month pricing. Like if you're negotiating month to month, that's a completely different scenario. Like the best sellers that I've ever dealt with for people that they have strong relationships will hint around things in a way to let somebody know, I'm a little weak here. Come for this, because this is something that you're going to need to look at. And I would guarantee you that their sales leader would not love that. But at the same time, there's a reason why that person's been really successful for a long time and it's kept their book of business, because they are transparent and they are able to solve problems with their relationships. And that, I think that's a big thing.
Well said. Well said. Go ahead, Tyler.
This goes back to the benchmarking part as well, which is even with that small volume, if you know roughly what it's worth and not from a large index, which I also had to do a lot of explaining over my career on why these prices are what they are.
Non-market adjustments.
No,
whenever like CMA or ISIS do non-market adjustments, the amount of stupid questions that I would get that week, it just drove me insane.
Yeah, I could ace an exam on non-market adjustments, which aren't even a thing. They like don't even exist. And yet this guy created them, and now I'm a student of it. I would say that
the amount of times that I would tell both of the index marker people to stop doing that, because you're not even close to the price anyway, and nobody cares what number you publish on there. They just care the delta. The amount of times I had that conversation, they're like, no, people look at us as like to know where the large buyers are buying. Is like, no, they don't. Let me tell you, as somebody who pays you money, nobody cares what number you put on there. It matters not at all. So please stop doing this non-market adjustment. And if you want to just put deltas instead of an actual number, I'm fine with that too. But anyway, that's me getting on my soapbox.
I think if you're a resin buyer out there and you want to extract the most out of your spend, organizing your data so that you know every input cost is key. And other key things that could be captured there. And you mentioned earlier the spreadsheet that has 17 things on it that nobody wants to fill out. If you're really great internally at organizing that data, you can RFQ in minutes. And you can answer things like what industry this is going into, what customer it supports, who controls the specification. Like you said, packaging, whether it goes through distribution. If you can organize your data, and I know this is a heavy lift for our clients and for anybody who's buying a lot of plastic, but if you can organize your data in an effective way, those stories become really easy to tell. And when it comes to stakeholder management, you have to inform with forecasts, with savings pipelines, with market outlooks, right? You have plant managers, finance stakeholders, procurement bosses, right? Like there's so much information has to flow through to your organization. So I think critical need is to organize your data in that way. And that's something that RTI is helping our clients do, so that when we work with our clients, we can help you organize your data in the most actionable ways that can help inform everybody and in your organization, and ultimately drive the value that they deserve, whether it's small volumes or large.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the salespeople are still going to hate getting an RFQ, even if it's really good. That's just because I've been on both sides.
They will.
They
And
gotta earn
specifically
their
like
money
the old
somehow.
school sellers, they're like,
They got to earn it somehow.
God, we got another spreadsheet.
Yep. No, this has been great, guys. I really appreciate the humoring me on the question, a shameless promotion for our webinar next week, which is going to tackle that very question on how do you deal with when your resin supplier says, well, given your volume, there's not much we can do to help. Justin, I may invite you as a special guest for that one, since I loved your unscripted, passionate responses there. But listen, guys, we've had a great session here. I really appreciate the dialogue. And Justin, thank you again for joining us. Love to have you back in the future. And
Anytime.
keep boldly speaking, loudly on, truth and plastics. And you've got fans here at Resin Smart by RTI.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm more than happy to have this kind of conversation again, because I feel like it's been very cathartic for me. Like I've been able to get a lot of that angst and anger from all of the years of being a buyer out. So it's almost like a counseling session. So I am more than happy to do this again at some point if you want.
Resin
We'll
buyer
pencil it
therapy
in.
sessions.
Yeah. And honestly, there's a show right there, just like procurement therapy. You
Yeah.
put together, like, what have you struggled with this week? Like, who asked you a question that you answered 2 days before in a completely different way? But it's like, I can only say the same thing so many times.
I think what we're talking about the markets is stale now. Like that's the word we've been using a lot lately, Tyler. Weak, oversupplied. I mean,
Soft.
Sluggish.
soft, sluggish. We've been wearing out the thesaurus on words there, but
You know what that means? It's a buyer's market.
the buyer's market.
Get aggressive.
Get aggressive, especially this time of year, everybody. So listen, I really appreciate everybody's time. Have a great week out there, and stay tuned for us next week on Resin Market Briefs. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. Cheers.